There's a quiet pattern happening in grocery stores across America right now, and once you notice it, you cannot stop seeing it. Older shoppers, people in their 70s, their 80s, moving slowly through the aisles, filling their carts with the same handful of items week after week, and paying in cash. It looks like ordinary shopping. It is not. They are not stocking up for a single snowstorm. They are not panic buying because of a headline they saw on the news. They are doing something much more deliberate than that. They are preparing for something they have lived through before, something they can feel coming again, and they are doing it so quietly that most people walk right past it without understanding what they are looking at. And here is the part that makes this story worth telling. The 12 foods themselves are not the interesting part. Anyone can make a list of cheap groceries. The interesting part is why these specific people, this specific generation, keep choosing these specific things. Because the reasons have almost nothing to do with taste, and almost nothing to do with a recipe, and everything to do with a lesson their generation learned young and never once forgot. Music. The 12th food on this list is going to surprise almost everyone watching, because it is not the kind of food you would ever expect to see a person stockpile. There is a reason so many of them insist on paying cash, and it is not what you think it is. And underneath the whole thing, underneath the beans and the rice and the careful counting, there is a single quiet driver that has nothing to do with the price of groceries at all. We are going to get to all 12. But first, you have to understand what this generation remembers that the rest of us were lucky enough to forget. Because without that, this just looks like an old person buying too much oatmeal. And it is so much more than that. For most of us alive today, food is something you assume. You do not think about it. You open an app or you drive 10 minutes, and there it is, stacked to the ceiling. More of it than any person could eat in a lifetime, available at almost any hour of any day. The shelves are always full. They have always been full for as long as most of us can remember. And because of that, we have quietly come to believe, somewhere deep down where we do not even examine it, that they will always be full. That the trucks will always run. That the system behind the shelves is permanent, solid, something you never have to think about. The people filling those carts do not believe that. Not because they are paranoid, because they remember. This is the generation raised by people who lived through the Great Depression. The ones who kept a root cellar not as a hobby, but as a matter of survival. The ones who canned tomatoes in August because a jar of tomatoes in February was the difference between a good winter and a hard one. The mothers who saved bacon grease in a tin on the stove. The fathers who could stretch a single chicken across a week of dinners and did not consider it a hardship, just the way things were. These older shoppers grew up in kitchens where an empty pantry was not an inconvenience. It was a warning. It meant something had gone wrong, and it meant you had to fix it before the cold came. That was the world they were shaped by. A full pantry meant security. An empty one meant danger. It was that simple, and it went that deep, planted in them, before they were old enough to question it. Music. And then the world changed around them. Somewhere in the last few decades, the whole country was quietly told that all of that old caution was obsolete. Why keep a full cellar when the store never closes? Why can your own vegetables when a can costs $1? Why keep 6 months of staples in the garage when a delivery can be at your door in an hour? Just in time, they called it. Everything arrives exactly when you need it, and not a moment before. And the entire modern system was built on the promise that the shelf would never, ever be empty. For a long time, that promise mostly held. And a generation that knew better slowly let their guard down, because everyone around them insisted there was nothing left to guard against. But the last several years have a way of reminding people of things they used to know. Empty shelves that were not supposed to be possible. Prices that climbed and did not come back down. Supply lines that turned out to be far more fragile than anyone had promised. And the older shoppers watched all of it happen, and something in them that had gone quiet for 40 years woke back up and said, very calmly, "There it is. I knew this could happen. My mother knew this could happen, and I am not going to be caught unprepared again." That is the instinct behind the cart. Not fear, exactly. Memory. Here is what makes this so easy to miss. There are no headlines about it. There is no movement, no protest, no dramatic sign that anything is happening at all. What there is instead is millions of small, private, quiet adjustments happening one household at a time, behind closed doors, in garages and basements and back closets all over the country. An extra bag of rice, tucked away where the first one used to sit alone. A second freezer bought secondhand and set up humming in the corner of the garage. A case of canned goods, restocked a little earlier this year before the prices had a chance to climb again. None of it is loud. None of it makes a scene. If you were not looking for it, you would never know it was happening at all. But go stand in a grocery store on a weekday morning, the way these shoppers do, and watch the carts. You will start to see it. The cart that is all staples and no treats. The one filled with the cheapest, most shelf-stable, most calorie-dense foods on the shelves, and nothing that spoils, and nothing frivolous. The shopper who checks the unit price on everything, who buys the biggest bag not because it is convenient, but because it lasts. The neighbor whose garage shelves, if you ever happen to see them, are suddenly quietly full. Most people walk right past all of it. They see an old person with a full cart, and they think nothing of it, or they think hoarding, or they think habit, and they move on. Music. But you are not going to be able to do that anymore, because now you know what you are looking at. You are looking at a generation preparing in the only way still fully available to them, for a winter they are not sure the rest of us are ready for. So let us talk about what is actually in those carts. Because these 12 foods were not chosen at random. Every single one earns its place. Before we start, understand this, because it matters. These are not survival bunker foods. Nobody here is buying freeze-dried ration packs off the internet or filling a bunker for the end of the world. Every single food on this list is cheap. Everyone is shelf-stable, able to sit in a pantry for months or years without going bad. Everyone is genuinely nutritious, which matters enormously for an aging body. And everyone is something these people actually eat, in real meals, on ordinary days. This is not fantasy prepping. This is quiet, practical, deeply sensible insurance that happens to be edible. We are going to move from the most practical foods up to the most surprising, and I am telling you now, the last 3 are where this gets interesting, and the 12th is where it stops being about food at all. Stay with me to the end for that one, because it reframes everything that comes before it. Number 1, dried beans and lentils. If you want to understand this entire phenomenon in a single food, start here. A bag of dried beans costs almost nothing. It will sit in a cupboard for years without spoiling. And it is dense with the 2 things that get harder to afford and harder to get as you age: protein and fiber. For a generation that watched their own parents stretch a pot of beans across days of meals, this is not a compromise food. It is the cornerstone. One bag can feed a person for a week. It asks nothing of you but a little water and a little time. And here's the part most people never think about. Beans are one of the few foods that a person on a fixed income can buy in quantity, store indefinitely, and rely on completely. There is a reason the older shoppers reach for the big bag without hesitating. To them, it is not a bag of beans. It is a week of not having to worry. Number 2, white rice, not brown. This surprises the health conscious, but the older generation knows exactly what they are doing. Brown rice, for all its nutrition, contains oils that go rancid, which means it spoils in a matter of months. White rice, stored properly, can last for decades. Decades. It is the single most efficient source of calories you can keep in a home, cheap beyond belief, and it pairs with everything else on this list to turn a handful of staples into an actual meal. A bag of beans and a bag of rice together form something close to complete nutrition for pennies a serving, and this generation figured that out long before it became a talking point. Rice is the quiet workhorse of the winter pantry, and it never, ever lets you down. Number 3, rolled oats. Here is a food that does 3 jobs at once, which is exactly why it earns a place. It is one of the cheapest breakfasts on earth. It stores for a year or more without any trouble. And it does something particular for an aging body. The fiber in oats helps with heart health and helps keep cholesterol in check, which matters more with every passing decade. A single large container of oats is dozens of warm breakfasts on cold mornings. The kind of food that fills you and steadies you and costs almost nothing to do it. For a senior watching the thermostat and the grocery bill at the same time, a hot bowl of oatmeal on a January morning is not just breakfast, it is warmth you can afford. Number 4. Canned tomatoes. This is where the pantry starts to become a kitchen. On their own, beans and rice and oats keep you alive. Canned tomatoes make them worth eating. A few cans turn plain staples into soup, into stew, into sauce, into something that tastes like a meal your mother made instead of something you are enduring. They last for years on a shelf. They carry vitamin C and other nutrients through the dead of winter when fresh produce is expensive and sad-looking. And they cost so little that keeping a dozen cans on hand is effortless. The older generation understands something we tend to forget: that surviving a hard winter and actually living through one are two different things, and the difference is often a can of tomatoes. Music. If your own grandmother kept a pantry like this, if you can picture her shelves right now, do me a favor and hit the like button, because it genuinely helps more people find this. And I have a feeling a lot of you are picturing exactly that. Number 5. Canned fish, sardines, salmon, tuna. This one deserves more respect than it usually gets, and the older generation gives it plenty. Canned fish is one of the cheapest sources of real protein available, and more than that, it carries omega-3 fatty acids, and in the case of sardines and canned salmon with the bones, a remarkable amount of calcium. For an aging body, that combination is close to ideal. Protein to hold onto muscle, omega-3s for the heart and the brain, calcium for bones that need every bit of help they can get. It lasts for years. It requires no cooking, no refrigeration, nothing. On a bad day, when the weather is cruel and cooking feels like too much, a can of sardines on a cracker is a complete, nourishing meal that asks nothing of you. These shoppers know that. They stack it high. Number 6. Peanut butter. Now, let me tell you about a woman I want you to picture, because she is the reason this list exists, and she is real in the sense that there are hundreds of thousands exactly like her. She is 81 years old. Her name does not matter because she could be anyone's grandmother. She lives alone now, in the same house she has lived in for 50 years, in a part of the country where the winters are long and the roads ice over and, for days at a time, nobody comes and nothing gets delivered. She was raised by a mother who canned everything, who kept a cellar full against every possible hard season, who taught her without ever quite saying it that a full shelf is the same thing as a safe night's sleep. Music. And so every autumn, without fanfare, she fills her pantry. And near the front, where she can always reach it, she keeps the peanut butter. Because peanut butter is, quietly, one of the most perfect foods a person in her situation can own. It is packed with protein and fat and calories, the things an older body needs to keep going. It lasts for a year or more without spoiling. It requires no cooking and no preparation. And on a morning when her hands are stiff and the house is cold and getting a real breakfast together feels like too much, a spoonful of peanut butter is warmth and strength and comfort all at once, sitting right where she can find it. Her children live in other states. They are good children, busy ones, and they call. But when the snow comes and the roads close, it is not her children who get her through it. It is that pantry. It is knowing, the way her mother knew, that whatever the winter does, she has already answered it. And when you understand that, you understand that she is not stockpiling food. She is stockpiling the one thing she cannot buy any other way: the certainty that she will be all right, on her own, no matter what. Number 7. Honey. Here is a food that will genuinely last forever, and the older generation loves it for exactly that reason. Honey, stored sealed, essentially never spoils. Archaeologists have found pots of it thousands of years old, still edible. It is a source of quick energy. It has natural properties that soothe a sore throat through cold season, and it turns plain oatmeal and plain tea into something that feels like a small kindness on a hard day. A jar of honey is a jar you never have to replace out of fear it has gone bad. And for people building a pantry meant to outlast a difficult stretch, that permanence is worth a great deal. It is one of the few foods you can buy once and simply trust. Number 8. Powdered and shelf-stable milk. This is a food that quietly solved a problem the older generation understands well. Fresh milk spoils fast and depends entirely on the refrigerator staying on and the store staying open. Powdered milk depends on neither. It stores for a very long time, it provides calcium and protein and vitamin D, all things that matter enormously for aging bones. And it is there when the fresh milk runs out and the roads are closed, and there is no getting more. It is not glamorous. Nobody is excited about powdered milk. But that is exactly the point. This generation is not buying food to be excited. They are buying food to be certain. And a box of powdered milk in the cupboard is one more thing that cannot fail them when the weather does. Music. While we are here, I am genuinely curious how many of you already keep some of these on hand without ever thinking of it as stockpiling. Tell me in the comments which of these 12 is already in your kitchen right now. I think the answer is going to surprise a lot of people, including you. Number 9. Winter squash and hardy root vegetables. This is where the wisdom really starts to show, because this is food that stores itself. Butternut squash, acorn squash, potatoes, onions, carrots, cabbage, kept somewhere cool and dark. These last for weeks and even months without any freezer, any can, any preservation at all. They just keep. Our ancestors survived entire winters on exactly these foods, and the older generation never fully forgot that. A squash bought in October is a meal available in December, sitting quietly in a basket in the cool of the basement, asking nothing of anyone. It is fresh food that behaves like stored food, and in a winter pantry that is a rare and precious thing. There is a reason the old-timers always kept a bin of potatoes and onions. They knew those humble vegetables would still be there, still good, long after the fancier food was gone. Number 10. Dried fruit. Raisins, prunes, dried apricots, dried apples. In a season when fresh fruit is expensive and often disappointing, dried fruit delivers concentrated nutrition, natural sweetness, and fiber that an older digestive system genuinely appreciates, all in a form that lasts for months. It travels well, it stores easily, and it scratches an itch that pure survival food cannot. The simple human need for something sweet and pleasant in the middle of a gray, hard stretch of the year. The older generation understands that a pantry meant to carry you through winter has to feed the spirit a little too, not just the body. A handful of raisins in the morning oatmeal is a small brightness, and small brightnesses matter more in January than most of us admit. Number 11. Coffee and tea. Now here is one that has nothing to do with nutrition, and everything to do with something just as important. You will not find a single serious calorie in a cup of black coffee. So why is it on nearly every one of these pantries, stacked and guarded like it is precious? Because it is precious, not as food, but as ritual. Think about what a hard winter actually does to a person living alone. It strips away the ordinary rhythms of life. The visits stop, the outings stop, the days blur together, cold and quiet and the same. And in the middle of that, the morning cup of coffee or the evening cup of tea is often the one thing that stays. It is the anchor. It is the small, warm, reliable ceremony that says, this is still my life. This is still a normal day. I am still here and still myself. The older generation knows, deep in their bones, that surviving a winter is not only about calories. It is about holding on to the small comforts that make a person feel human. And so they stockpile the coffee and the tea with the same care they give the beans and the rice, because they understand that the mind needs feeding as much as the body does. Running out of coffee in the middle of a long, hard winter is not a nutritional problem. It is a morale problem. And morale, when you are old and alone and the snow will not stop, is survival too. And number 12. Here is the one I promised would surprise you, and here is where this whole thing stops being about food. Salt. A container of plain salt costs about $1. It has almost no calories. On its own, you cannot make a meal of it, and nobody would try. So why does it belong on a list of the 12 most important foods a senior stockpiles before winter? Why do the old-timers, who waste nothing and count everything, always keep it in quantity? Because salt is the reason the other 11 foods last. Music. Salt is how you preserve meat when the power is out. Salt is how you keep food from spoiling when you cannot rely on anything else to do it for you. For thousands of years, salt was so essential to survival that people were paid in it, fought wars over it, built entire economies around it. And the generation filling these carts is old enough to have been raised by people who remembered a world where salt meant the difference between food that lasted the winter and food that rotted. It is the humblest thing on the shelf, and the most important, the quiet foundation that makes self-sufficiency actually possible. And that is the whole secret, sitting right there in a dollar container of salt. Because when you look at what salt really represents, the ability to preserve, to store, to not need the store, or the truck, or the delivery, or anyone else at all, you finally see what this has been about the entire time. These people are not stockpiling food. They are stockpiling independence. They are stockpiling the ability to look a hard winter in the eye and say, "I do not need you to come save me. I have already taken care of myself." So let us say the thing plainly now, because you have earned it, and because it was never really about the groceries at all. This was never about beans or rice or the price of a can of tomatoes. Those are just the visible surface of something much deeper. What you are actually watching when you watch an older person quietly fill a cart with shelf-stable food and pay for it in cash is a generation that has come to a quiet and sober conclusion that they cannot fully count on the systems around them anymore. Not the supply chains that emptied out when everyone swore they never would. Not a fixed income that buys less every single year while the prices climb. Not family who love them, but live states away and have their own lives and their own storms to weather. Not help that may or may not arrive when the roads close and the temperature drops and something goes wrong at 2 in the morning. They have looked honestly at all of it, without drama and without announcing it to anyone, and they have decided to rely on the one thing still fully within their control. A full pantry is the last piece of security that no policy can take away, no market can inflate away, and no delivery failure can touch. It is the one form of preparation that is entirely, completely theirs. And there is something else running underneath it. Something even quieter than the money and the supply chains. Something that gets talked about even less. Loneliness. Because a full shelf, for a person living alone through a long winter, is a kind of company. It is reassurance you can see with your own eyes every time you open the cupboard. It is the physical, undeniable proof that you will not be caught helpless, that you will not be the frightened old person who ran out and had no one to call. In a season that isolates people so completely, that full pantry sits there in the dark and says, every single day, you are going to be okay. You made sure of it. You are not as alone as the winter wants you to feel. That is what those 12 foods really are. Not a grocery list. A wall against fear, built one cheap, sensible item at a time. And now I can tell you the real reason, the one that goes underneath even all of that, the insight that most people never quite put into words. For a person who has actually lived through scarcity, real scarcity, the kind where the shelves really were empty, and the winter really was hard, and there really was not enough, a full pantry does something that has nothing to do with the food inside it. It regulates fear. It answers, in a physical and permanent way, the oldest and most frightening question a human being can ask. Will I be all right? Music. You cannot reason your way out of that fear. You cannot be talked out of it. It lives somewhere deeper than logic, planted young, in childhood kitchens, by parents who knew hunger personally. But you can answer it, and the way this generation learned to answer it, the way their parents answered it and their grandparents before them, is with a full shelf. Every can, every bag, every jar is not really food. It is a small, concrete piece of the sentence, I am safe. That is why they do not feel foolish doing it, no matter what anyone thinks. To them, it does not feel like paranoia. It feels like peace. And that, finally, is why so many of them pay in cash. It is partly habit, yes, the way an entire generation was raised to handle money. But it is also something deeper, the same instinct that fills the pantry in the first place. a quiet, bone-deep sense that the things you can hold in your hand are the only things truly under your control. Cash does not depend on a card reader working, or a bank staying open, or a system staying online. It is real, and it is theirs, and it works no matter what. It comes from exactly the same place as the salt and the rice. It is one more thing that cannot be taken away when everything else is uncertain. Which leaves one last question, and it is a harder one than any item on the list. Is this fear, or is it wisdom that the rest of us were careless enough to lose? It would be easy to look at a garage full of rice and beans and call it paranoid. But sit with it a moment longer, and something turns over. These people are not imagining threats that never happened. They watch the shelves go empty. They live the winters that close the roads. They remember a world their own parents told them about, a world where being unprepared was not a quirk, but a danger. They are not being paranoid. They are remembering. And in a culture that has forgotten almost entirely how to take care of itself, that quietly assumes the trucks will always run and the shelves will always be full, maybe the strange ones are not the seniors with the full pantries. Maybe it is the rest of us, standing in a grocery store with 3 days of food at home and a total, unexamined faith that nothing will ever go wrong. A full pantry used to be the most ordinary thing in the world. That it now looks remarkable, that it now looks like something worth making a video about, might say a great deal more about the rest of us than it does about them. So the next time you are in a grocery store on a weekday morning and you see an older shopper moving slowly through the aisles, filling a cart with the same 12 quiet, sensible foods, paying in cash, asking nothing of anyone, you will know exactly what you are looking at now. You are not looking at hoarding. You are not looking at fear. You are looking at a lifetime of hard-won wisdom, packed into a shopping cart, preparing calmly for a winter the rest of us have simply decided to trust will be gentle. They are not so sure. And history, more often than we would like to admit, has tended to agree with them. The things we overlook have a way of becoming the things we cannot ignore. A full shelf is easy to walk past, until the one winter it turns out to matter more than anything else in the house. So, let me ask you honestly, because I read every one of these. Do you have someone in your life who keeps a pantry like this? A parent, a grandparent, a neighbor you have quietly watched do exactly what we talked about today? Or is it you? Are you the one already filling the shelves before the cold comes? Tell me what is on your shelf down in the comments below. I have a feeling this one is going to hit closer to home than most of us expect.